and Jason and Mel and Ken. I'm told there are 15 people registered for the class or for this orientation session. There's the 4 of you here now. Appreciate you being there. We'll do a small introductions when we get a few more people joining us. But that being said, we'll just wait another minute or two just to make sure there's any late comers. We don't want to delay. We only have an hour, so we can't wait too long. Bob, just say hello and a little bit about yourself and why you're here.
Bob, you're on mute.
Okay, let's try that.
Yeah, go for it.
There we go. Bob Davidson, Silver Beach Consulting. I work with a number of nations on the coast of BC on a lot of economic development projects, proposals, and grant writing and things like that. So this was a good session to attend.
Add to your repertoire. And you say the coast, mid coast, up coast, west coast of Vancouver Island.
Mostly Central and North Coast.
Okay. So are you a Prince Rupert Way or yourself or Bella Bella or? I'm
located in New Westminster, but but yeah, I have clients up and down the coast.
Yeah, as we do too. Okay, good. Perhaps we'll work together. Thanks, Jason. Just curious what brings you here today and what your thoughts are in taking the class orientation. We were guy.
Afternoon. Sorry, I just got out of another meeting with our CFO.
Yeah. We were hanging out with Mo, were you?
No, our CFO is Ronnie's crew. You're thinking of We Will Come First Nation.
That's right.
But yeah, so I'm the new manager of Economic Development Nation. So just looking at possibilities, whether or not the nation wants to go down the road of actually setting up a separate development corporation, because everything right now really all still sits with council at the moment. So yeah, so just basically gathering some information. I've sort of had informal conversations with my colleague Jody Dick with regards to where we may want to go at some point with regards to overall economic development structure wise anyways, and maybe try to get some of that political and government stuff away from some of the decisions of the nation's economic development activities.
I think I worked with Jody Dick. Did she get involved with the Tribal Journeys Visit Your Nation 5 or 6 years ago?
I'm not too sure. I just moved back at the beginning of March, so I'm not too sure if she was involved in that.
I was working with the Songhees Nation at the time, and we were doing a logistics support for organizing some of the nations on the coast to come together and get some information. So I remember the name rings a bell. So Weebukai rather was going to be the host that year. So we spent a little time up in your territory last summer. We were anchored out the backside of your island there, enjoying the heat. You're a little cooler up there than it was in downtown Vancouver, I can tell you.
Yeah, I bet.
Even though they did close the pub at Cordy's Island when they got too hot, the restaurant wouldn't even open. All right, well, great to see you again, Jason. And Ken, so just we'll get going in another minute. So Ken, if you could just say hello and let us know what brings you here today.
Hello, I'm here to encourage Indigenous truckers to sign up for contracts with Canada Post. Most of them are one truck, one route, one vehicle. They could be 8 hours, or it could be it could be just a few hours a day, or it could be multi routes, multi trucks. But wherever they are, we've got hundreds of contracts in BC, and a number of them are involve Indigenous communities. And there should be an Indigenous driver driving an Indigenous-owned vehicle, or a leased vehicle in and out of those locations.
So you're a development? Are you a development contractor yourself, or are you just trying to do the mix and match thing for everybody?
No, I'm just trying to make sure that people are aware that those contracts are available, and I can provide any links that people require. So
that's amazing. I'd love to talk to you more about that, because we have clients across the entire province, and that sounds like an amazing concept. Owner operator. I know some of the people that do that kind of stuff, in more of the urban areas. But yeah, that's kind of cool. Well done.
Elsie can give you my email address, but I can
Yeah,
also
just put it,
on
just,
the.
just put it in the
put it
chat
in
and we'll
the
get caught up.
chat.
Yeah, that'd be great. I love that. Yeah, thanks.
Okay,
Appreciate
excellent.
that.
Thank you.
And Ashley, you've joined us. We'll get going as soon as Ashley says hello, and then we'll get going.
Hi, everybody. My name's Ashley. I'm a student at Mount Royal University here in Calgary. I'm studying business, but also really interested in economic development for my community back home in Manitoba. We
Okay.
are, yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us today. We only got the hour, so we'll get going. I'll just put the screen share up and introduce myself. It was a little glitchy earlier, so let's see if we can get this sorted out. All right. There we go. Bingo. And we'll just back that up to the beginning. Yes, hello, I'm Mark Salter. Aishka Osiam Nishkwelekwa. Greetings here from Lekwungen territory here on the South Island and around the Victoria area. We live in Chetsametsa, which is now known as Colwood Royal Bay. My wife, Lara, who was also to join us in this conversation, just returned from the hospital visit. So she's not feeling at all well. So she's just taking a moment to recover from the some of the, shall we say, diagnostic work that she's been going through over the last 12 hours. So really appreciate your time with us today. And so I've been working with Carden since 2017. And prior to that, worked with the Songhees Nation, helped to open the Songhees Wellness Center in the Lekwungen territory, just outside Victoria. And that was a 50,000 square foot facility with convention services systems, and help with that, along with the economic opportunities in tourism. We developed a cultural tourism tour program for canoes, and put a lot of effort into turning the wellness center into a convention space. When engaging with the culinary section of our building, which had a catering style kitchen, so we were able to serve meals to 500 people at a time. So quite a large endeavor for the nation. It was very successful. And previous to that, worked in back east with the Six Nations, Shweekan Mohawks, to work on their business development of sorts. But they're the men who did the steelwork for the Mohawk nations. They didn't have benefits programs outside when they're on the road. So we developed a benefits program for them. I was in the insurance business at the time. So we'll move forward onto this. Our agenda today is going to talk about this. So if you have questions, we're a little bit organic in this sense. If you have a question, throw your hand up visually, or you may use the buttons, of course. If there's any comments you want to make, you can open up the comment bar. We can have a look in there. Someone's put a chat in reference in there now. Thanks, Ken. And that being said, if something comes up, let me know. We're talking a little about effective establishments, some legal structure options, setting the strategic direction of a DC, which is really critical part of this whole process. It's about being strategic. And then we're going to leave room for some Q&A at the end. So if we hopefully have any lingering questions that haven't come up. And I do like to ask at this time, is anyone here who feels they'd like to open with a prayer? All right. Okay. That being said, we'll move forward. Alrighty. There we go. We have a little what we call learner conduct agreement. We're all coming together here to work collaboratively. We want to create a safe space. As I said, we're a little informal. If you have a question, you want to put up a thought, please share it. And if you think that there's some way we can enhance this work with some of language and it's unique to your nation, please share it with us. We'd love to be able to do that as well. And so let's reestablishing a DC. So we heard a little bit from some of the participants around new dev cores with Jason and his team up there. Bob works with a number of nations on the coast that are looking to set up and I guess put dev cores together and or reestablish them depending on where they're at. So that's an important piece. Ashley tells us she's here to learn because she's working as a student, wants to bring these ideas back to her nation. So I really applaud you for that. And I do like Ken's concept of the owner operator truck delivery. That's kind of a neat thing. I like that. That's kind of cool. because the rural postal delivery is really critical. So we're looking at reestablishing workshop, putting these dev cores together. Now, there are new tools and language for business development today. Nations have thousands of years of experience and expertise in being business people and being successful. What we like to emphasize is when it comes to Indigenous business development, often there is cultural components in your community that can support and lead that. And we're a firm believer as these dev cores get into creation in your communities, that they have a significant cultural connection to your community, and that they represent the best and brightest of your ideas and values of your community. And so in that respect, it's important that in doing so and bringing culture into the dev core, important that as you employ members of the community, that ability to express oneself culturally in the workplace is supported, and therefore brings a lot more pride into the work and gives the dev core a true reflection of the nation's intent and reflects the community's needs. And that's an important component we like to emphasize specifically. We don't like to see things that are just cookie cutter. One size does not fit all. Now, in setting up these dev cores, I'm just going to make a little adjustment to my screen here. We look at leaders. Now, we say leaders in some respects. We look at elected leadership. We look at leadership inside the dev core itself, either through the board or particularly the senior managers, we like to call it. We don't like to get too specific about what name we give somebody. We just like to call it the senior manager. So that's a leader. They've got lots of activities and responsibilities. So establishing a dev core, conducting the opportunities for identification, and looking at what's going to benefit the community in the style of work that's done. So this thing about leakage studies, the idea that money comes into the nation's reserve lands, and then how much of the community is spending money outside the nation, and is there a business opportunity in that? So that's looking at local needs as well. And looking to be a diversified and looking for partnerships. Now, I know we work with one community, they were looking to go into tourism, and they managed to put their board together, and they got the Chamber of Commerce chair to join their board. They got a local municipal government member, a local elected official to join their board. So that was important for them because they had a really new partnership arrangement that they were able to do that. So really important to look outside the nation's reserve lands for people that are going to support your endeavors. And because we're looking at culturally and values-based businesses, by expressing those things up front in your purpose statements and so forth, you can attract people to help you realize that vision. So that's what we like to focus on. Fundamental piece that for dev cores is, if it's to benefit the community members, knowing what the community members' skills and wants are around employment. We don't like the McJob syndrome where people are just going to be interchangeable. Like if we look at the flaggers, for example, an honorable business, important, but it's not a career. We want to create businesses that are going to take people with their hopes and dreams and move them forward. So if we look at Ken's idea, that's the person who owns their own vehicle, has their own responsibilities, and moves their business forward. That's an important component. The taxation laws initiatives, that's an important piece of it. It's also important to talk about whether you want to be ISO certified. We speak a lot about governance policies. That's a lot of what we do as well. And it's all about policies and procedures. And when you do the ISO certification, that's what it's all about. It's International Standards Organization. We know that businesses, and especially dev cores, that strive to meet those kind of governance abilities, do very well. We can cite Member 2 as an example. They were one of the first communities as a community and their dev core to get ISO certified 20 plus years ago. And it speaks to the power of their abilities, because today a small community in a rather remote location, Nova Scotia, is an international business powerhouse because they've got the ISO certification. And if we look here in BC, we've got the hotel in the Okanagan Nation runs down in the Soyuz, and it's also ISO certified, and they're quite proud of it. They put out their ISO certification and their policies and procedures for everyone to see. Really a critical point. And of course, back to Ken's point here about marketing the nation and members-owned businesses. So, emphasizing that you support locally, support the community members who are doing this work. That's a critical part of nation success. So we look at, as part of the process of economic development, is about nation rebuilding. It's about expressing the ideals of your community economically, so as to take advantage of all the opportunities that come from that, through revenues that come through taxation or through business endeavors and activities and partnerships. And so that's an important component. So looking at having the sovereignties component, nation makes those important decisions. To make that possible, you need a capable governing institutions. That means you have to have policies and processes in place to make that work. Really important part of this part of the process in the DevCore and the governance is around dispute resolution mechanisms. So as we bring people together, we all have a vision that we want to do. And because we're becoming dependent on each other to achieve that, that's the spot where we're going to have conflict, because you don't be in conflict with someone that you can depend on. And so having those resolution processes built in, as well as amendment processes built into your governance and your business plans is critical. We talked a little about culture earlier. It's important that the cultural supports come into that business to bring the members in and make them comfortable expressing themselves culturally in your business. And then depending on what the business is, it can be very much a part of how you are successful in that business. And of course, being strategic. Now we work with the Native Nations Institute down in Arizona, and we know that having these long-term financial priorities is important, and so it's important to look the long-term, be strategic, and find a way that your nation can be successful as it goes forward. And then, being open and participatory in your governance policies and your planning allows for people to recognize the changes that need to come along, what's going to happen in the way of new opportunities. And if people have a good dialogue in their business and people can share openly what's of concern or opportunities, concerns around whistleblower processes, so that when things aren't going well, there's a safe place to share those concerns so the business can be successful. A little bit about legal structure options. Now, depending on where you're going at, because we have such a diverse group here with Bob with his support work, and Ken with his owner operators, and Jason trying to set up a DevCore for his particular nation, and back at home again, so he knows what this is important. So the elected leaders are the drivers for this. They have to set the tone and be supportive and be involved. Involved is the point where they're getting the reports and getting information back, but not involved in actually running or operating, of course, because we want to have this distinction built out. And we've all little talked about that, where some of the nation's businesses are still within the community, and that can attract risk. We don't want that. So we want to find a way to reduce that risk to the nation, but at the same time, make sure that the business reflects the values of the community. And it's given mandates and directions and support that meet the nation's and its members' needs. An example we could say is, when you have a DevCore and it's getting going, and it undertakes a business activity which the nation's membership may not find to be something they're comfortable with. It can be something as simple as, some communities will not want to have the ability to have a liquor store or the selling of marijuana, particularly. That may not be something that they particularly are comfortable with. Without those inputs to the DevCore, and the DevCore's only opportunity is to just make some money, they're going to go and make some money. And that could be setting up a small cannabis dispensary that meets the needs of the marketplace, but doesn't meet the expectations of the nation's membership. So really important to be mindful of that, because we're supporting the community-owned DevCores to ensure that it operates in accordance with the characteristics and is accountable to the leaders. So that's an important part. So the DevCore does not go off and do things that the nation's leadership and membership don't like. Anyway, we can go look things like mining, oil and gas. Some communities don't want it, and they're very adamant about that. Now, the other part of this is in putting your DevCore together is to decolonize the process. and make sure that it's a process that's driven by the membership, not by the lawyer. They work for you, not you for them. And so making sure that your worldview is framed in there properly. There's the systems and the assumptions are not, based on the colonized view of things. And you want this DevCore to express who you want to be in the world, who the community wants. That's a positive thing, because then everyone has a pride point to work from. And there are, as we talked about, there's government-owned ones, then there's the social enterprise concept, and of course there is a development corporation. And the social enterprise, by definition, is an activity to engage members in employment. It could be engaging them into training and orientation so they can move on to other careers, but it's not primarily designed to make money. It's there to support either a social entity, it could be a training piece, that kind of stuff. And we've used the word B Corp, and that's a values-laden and values-driven corporate structure that looks at triple bottom lines, so that not only does the business do well, the community does well, but so does the environment. So those are also critical and often important values to the community. And then once we've got this development underway and this business underway, we've got to look at the direction. What's the intent? What's the nature of our business? And of course, what risks do we have when we endeavor in that business? And we've got to make these aware early. And the purpose statements is really talked about a little bit earlier. Is it job creation, like we just talked about? Or is it training, as we talked about? Or is it cultural, which is a social enterprise? Or is it just to make some money? And we have to look at the risk factors. Is the nature and activities by the individual company should be separated into risks, the nations, and separated from nations' programs and services. So, when there's I'm thinking of one community we worked with, they got into the marine business, the service business. They had to separately incorporate structures so that they need the liability that comes from operating these marine service industry businesses wouldn't be reflected and come back to the nation to be accountable for. So you got to make sure that when you make those decisions about what business you're getting involved with, you got to make sure, how is the nation being shielded or protected from risk? It's really important to talk about that. We like this statement, form follows function. So the purpose should be established. We talked about a purpose statement earlier. Should be established by the leadership in the form of elected leaders and ultimately the leaders of your DevCore to form the base of determining whether this is going to be a government-owned social enterprise, B Corp, or a DevCore. So really good conversations, and I guess is applicable to Jason and his conversations with his team there at Weaver, that he's got to have this conversation about what business we want to get involved in, what's the best way to structure that business so as to make sure we reduce the risk to our nation. And of course, what is the decision-making process within your being placed in your government, in your nation? So how is the process of approaching chief and council? What is their protocols? Those have to be brought in. And this is applicable, I guess, for Bob, because he works with so many different communities. Knowing how to navigate those decision-making processes is important. And we applaud you for your efforts, Bob. So we talk about a little bit about setting direction. So we've got this idea of what we want to do, and we've got an idea of how we want to structure it. And we want to set the strategic direction for a DevCore. And we like to call it good corporate governance, because as we said, we are governance and policy procedure heavy in Carden. We like that that's a really important process to ensure people's safety. And that's from risk financially and personally, physically. All right. So setting the direction of your DevCore, as that's been now your decision, you've decided that because the business structure you want to have, the risks and the goals are such that you want to make some money, but you want to keep the nation safe. So it's to be a DevCore. And is it the DevCore you want? Is it a DevCore going to meet your community's needs? So in doing so, establishing effective DevCore requires leaders, which is the counselors and or shareholders, depending on, or both, do the important work of articulating their cultural needs and interests of a nation. So really, you got feedback often comes to elected leadership through the CCP in the nation. So people understand, leadership understands what the community wants, where they're comfortable. And as I said earlier, some communities will not want to depending on where they are on the coast, will not have any fish farming going on potentially. They may not be encouraging any logging or mining at the shoreline, that kind of stuff. So really important that everyone is clear on that. And as I said before, at Carden, we really are a values-driven, bottom line, process-driven operation. We like the idea that values will lead us the way we want to go. And by stating our values up front in a business situation, others will be attracted to it. It's a natural law of attraction. If we both have the same value set and doing a thing together, then we can overcome some of the difficulties in our in issue resolution going forward, because we share the same values. And those values should be aligned with those of the nation's values. And that comes from the nation's principles. And we create a mandate, our purpose statement in this DevCore, and then we create our mission from there. And then, of course, we then put into what we call performance measures and limits. So we talked a little bit about, when we have this DevCore, we're not going to allow them to sell marijuana and alcohol. That's a limit. So where our performance measure will give to that DevCore is we expect a return on investment of X amount of percent. Do the things you got to do to be successful, but don't do these things. We don't want to be involved in these 3 activities, whatever they happen to be. And of course, we talked a little bit about your board members, and I mentioned earlier about the one nation we worked with that had a tourism development opportunity, and they were very fortunate in setting out their board and putting their matrix, what they wanted for competency. They wanted people in the tourism business. So they got the one of the, I think it was leader of the Chamber of Commerce locally, stepped forward and was very amenable to working with the nation, because as a Chamber of Commerce, their membership was 60 or 70% tourism. So they were a really good participatory board member. So you've really got to get what we call industry subject experts or subject matter experts. We don't want this to be a roosting place for patronage and putting people in place just because there's an obligation to give somebody something to do. We want these board members to have some skills that will benefit the board and ultimately the community. So we put that out. We tell people what we want. We want to have someone who has some legal understandings and can read a performance statements, has some business experience. And we're back to Ken with his owner operator businesses, people who have a small business themselves, have a sense of what's important. So we want those kind of people on our board to give us advice. And then when we move on to our shareholder and board members' rules and responsibilities, we want to tell them what we expect of them. They're not just here to, come together once every 3 months and collect an honorarial check and chew the fat. We are expecting some responsibilities to be conducted, and we have some expectations, and we want to share what that is up front. What do we need from you? And it's important to ask that question. And then, of course, we like to really emphasize corporate governance policies, which, as I said earlier, includes a issue resolution component, community economic development planning, which means community economic development planning, which means we talk to the community, we go out and see and speak to people. We've done that in lots of communities where we've taken this same CCP style format of engagement and made it a community economic development workshop. And we put all the different economic opportunities in that particular community's opportunity sphere, as they were a coastal nation with forestry assets as well as fishing assets. And they wanted me to make sure that there was all those opportunities available to people. And by doing that and reporting on what's available, we then could drive our capacity, which is through our community advisory group, which we're going to get to in a second. But the idea that if we have our skills inventory, which we talked about earlier, and we have, majority of our members want to learn how to drive a truck, get a truck driver's license, they can haul logs out of the community in the community's forestry agreements. So they need some training, and then some people want to be mechanics. They need to get that orientation, because now they've got career-oriented jobs that can support the nation's economic activities. If they're going to be logging the trees, we need to have people who can haul the logs, repair those trucks, as well as some of the machinery inside the sawmill, for example. So, but if we have a community of that wants to all be tourism operators and wants to run whale watching boats and fishing boats and food businesses drive from the shoreline, and we're trying to push logging, then we're not listening, we're not connecting properly. So it's really important to get that. We're going to get that information from our community advisory group. It helps to build business at capacity, and we want economic diversification. So one of the things that, and this is what we can speak to for Ken, having small business owner workshops to tell people what it is involved is important. That's your business capacity development. That's something the economic DevCorps can work on, so that people start to think, what a business needs. What did our family used to do, and what was it responsible for before colonization? What did we have a particular specialty in doing? Some families are canoe builders, some are home builders, and so we have to make those connections and find out. So we want to be responsive, and we want to be good corporate citizens. So we want to have good accountability to our membership. So if we're not going in the right direction and someone brings it up, we want that to be respectfully heard. And of course, the last part of it is the shareholders agreements and the business charters. So if the Dev corporation's set up by the nation's membership and the community with a loan, then there's to be a loan agreement. There's to be a repayment agreement. Those are to be articulated and spelled out, so that the community knows that there's an investment been made in this business, that the right kind of people have been hired to manage that business. There's an awareness of that business responsibility to train and include members in that business, but also that there's going to be a dividend or a payout to the nation to repay that loan, and to the nation to generally then have revenue that can put into programs and services to benefit everybody. Now we're covering a lot of ground here pretty fast, so if anyone has any particular questions or thoughts, just take a moment, and I'll just take a drink of glass, because we're going to get to something quite different here right now. All right. We talk a little bit about shareholder primacy because we really emphasize that a community economic development corporation should reflect and support the community members' needs and be responsive to the community members. And when we look at developing our legal structures through a mission statement or a purpose statement for the business entity or the corporation, the important part there is that we want to support the community, whereas traditionally a development corporation or a corporation that's off the shelf, out of the box kind of thing that comes out of the lawyer's back door, doesn't recognize the values set up by a nation, why they're important. So that's based on what we call shareholder primacy in the Western legal system. Corporations are there to serve themselves. That's what the legal structure says. And so long as the work's done to feed and support itself, it's meeting its own needs. And whereas we believe that that's not an equitable system, it has lots of negative downsides, both socially and environmentally. And so most lawyers are hired to assist with Dev Corps. They're not Indigenous, have little experience in working with or setting up the First Nations DCs. As a result, DCs established in that Western model. Concept back in 32 as a way to end at the end of the Depression to encourage private sector to take more risks. They made them only accountable to themselves. Prior to that, businesses gave themselves more responsibilities for the communities they were in. We know that several of the large business entities that are still with us today in the United States, for example, start off as small corporate entities with corporate towns. They were accountable to their people living there. They provide the most of the work there. And so we're very much in tune to supporting that neighborhood. Whereas this process came up and allowed them to only be responsible for themselves. And what happens in the community is not of their concerns. And we believe that a community economic development corporation run by a nation should support and be respectful to the members in its community. So that's really important. So we want to get away from that knee-jerk standard Western model. And so we've talked a bit about some of those downsides. So shareholder primacy, the off-the-shelf model, it doesn't work so good. It's important when we work with ISC to demonstrate and utilize economic development funds to undertake those strategic economic development initiatives, not using lands and economic development services programs as a slush fund, but we've got to make sure that we stay focused on growing the business in a proper business-like fashion. And it's important that your economic organizational capacity be developed and worked on. So we should be looking at, making sure that the people who are working in the organization have the requirement skills, and as they want to, they're supported to learn and grow, and that the board that leads them and advises the general manager or senior manager has those goals mindful as well. So really important. That will help lead the nation to greater self-sufficiency. We talked a little bit about values and principles. This is where we can slow down a little bit, and we can have a little more of a conversation. Values are those things that are important to us and how we perceive and behave in the world. They develop from our family and our communities and societies and our experiences, and are unique to every single person and society and culture. And distinct cultural values of our nations must be the foundation of your organization to be effective. So the values are then filtered through the principles, which are often confused, and values are an ethics and morals, which we evaluate our actions for rightness and wrong with. So our principles are that filter of our values. Okay, so that's how it works. And as we know, most nations have collectivist values, wherein one views the world as a priority of the group over the individual. And by contrast, Western values are more individualistic, where one prioritizes individual needs above those of the rest of their community. And given that values inform behavior, DevCore should behave consistently with your nation's values. And we've talked about that. We're going back in a circle all the time, because that's what drives this particular unique component of Indigenous nation-held DevCore, because it reflects the values of your community. And by reflecting those values and encouraging cultural participation in the business, people are made to feel comfortable expressing themselves culturally in the workplace, and their cultural activities are respected and made and allowed and accommodated within the business. And that speaks to more inclusiveness of the whole community. And then, again, we're bringing everyone back together around, wow, we're quite proud of this place. The business does a good job. We're very mindful of supporting our cultural values every time we turn and open and everything we do. And that gives me a lot of civic pride in my community. And I've articulated why values are important at a DevCore from a cultural perspective and a motivation for people, but there's also other more very tangible facts around revenues growing at a greater rate. Job creation grows at a great rate, because when we worked with other businesses at a values-based level, we can then, as I said earlier, it helps us overcome some of the growth pains, some of the discomforts that come with working on certain projects. And because we all have the same goals and values, and stock prices are as a result of the value in your business will grow because of the values, and profits will of course grow. And these are things that have been resourced from the Kotler and Gesk surveys from 2007 and the Coos and Posner work, which is really critical. So the nations organizations are unique in Canada, and these different values must be reflected in our organizations if they're to be effective. So that's really critical. And that we've seen examples where, a North American car company going to Japan to bring its production to that community, and there was a values disconnect. And despite the professionalism of the Japanese workforce, the value set that was set in that industry, in that automotive plant particularly, they just couldn't make it work together. It was the corporate values of the American car company and the values of the Japanese workforce collided, and therefore were not successful. Both individually make good vehicles, but when they came together to work, they had different values orientation and couldn't make it work. So that's where the rub can come, and really critical. We talk about performance measures. When we set up our DevCore, depending on what the goals in our charter are, we have to look at the measures we want to have in there. So for Community Economic Development Corps, partners should be collaboratively developed, used to report on performance and monitor progress. These measures are increasing in number and scope, and some of the examples would be creating consistent and sustainable financial benefits to ensure the development corporation's sustainable and reinvestment to the nation, because that's what the community wants to see. They want to see money coming back in. It's not a one-way street. That there be skills and training and employment and contracting opportunities for the nation's members and citizens. That's an important part of a performance measure. So when you're having a partnership arrangement and a conversation with another business entity, you want to quantify some of these things. What skills transfer training will you make available? What training will be available? And what employment and opportunities for businesses to support that enterprise? And I'm just thinking of a logging company, for example. So we've got members who are, certified mechanics in this, and to service those vehicles. Will they be giving contracting opportunities for the DevCorps? And will they be supported in doing that through some skills training and or employment support benefits, that kind of stuff? We want to see that that's done in a good fundamental way. And again, be sustainable through the management. So the management it's not a revolving door of management. We want the management to be trained and supported and potentially grow out of the nation's membership. And more importantly, protection of the territory. We talked about the DevCorps' goals and purposes. And as long as the values of the Corps represent the nation's values, there will be ongoing protection of the territory as a part of that. The example being, we're not going to log or mine in this territory, nor are we going to grow fish, for example. And then, of course, when you do have those partnerships and you're looking to develop corporate work, what we call hard and soft infrastructure. When you have these partnership arrangements, what can be brought to the table beyond skills training and employment and contracting opportunities? Do we have the opportunity that you're going to be in here making these roads to service a part of our nation? Will these roads meet the environmental standards of the nation? And will those roads be built with nation members contracting services? And then, of course, the example we sometimes use is the old-fashioned call center. When an employer or a business comes into your community and they want to use and have members join them, that there'll be some infrastructure improvements that should stay. It shouldn't be dependent on the business being there. That's part of the business of being successful, but it's also going to be staying when they leave. And then, of course, by recognizing the values of the nation and recognizing that culture is important in the business, cultural vitalization is a natural growth from that. Because if I can express myself culturally in the workplace and I'm not inhibited from practicing and supporting my cultural values, I'm going to be encouraged to continue them and support others in doing so. And that's how revitalization starts. It starts right with each individual sharing without any reservation, no holding back. And of course, when we're talking to our DevCorps and our purpose statements, and we're looking at our key performance indicators, protecting the nation's intellectual property, which is some of the traditional knowledge, the customary laws and the protocols that are that important to the business. And then if we're looking at a tourism-focused community economic development corporation, I know that the work I've done, one of the conversations around what stories to share and what sites to be shared with the public was a really important conversation to get supportive members in the cultural tourism program, because there were some places and things the nation members did not want anyone else to know about, where they were or what they were. And so that's an important conversation around intellectual property and protecting it. And that's what you want to make sure that the DevCorps that you undertake has that understanding that they can't disrespect the cultural values of the community. Even though it's making somebody some money, our first priority is cultural preservation. And again, we're back to, making sure that members, the citizens of the nation, have some capacity development ongoing. We talked about that earlier when we talked about creating sustainable and reinvestment in skills training and development employment. Here we're making sure that the understandings, the training and employment contracting, small business workshops help to diversify the economy is really important. and support self-sufficiency. Having one large entity in your community and it then being successful and draws a lot of employment, and then it reduces its size because of if it's a commodity base, and then a lot of people are out of work. That's not good diversity. It's not sustainable. And so you want to have that mix. And so having people oriented and trained in business and business opportunities, people will be resourceful. And as they have been for thousands of years in your traditional territories, looking at what opportunities exist, how they can be skilled in doing that and make a living doing so. So when we're looking at monitoring that performance, because we've set up these measures, we want certain things to happen. We want to set our goals. We want to look at the objectives going forward. And then we want to have these tasks and activities to realize those objectives. So we're going to, let's say if we're going to be working in tourism, for example, and we want to have, let's say, a cultural tour. So one of the things we'll need to have is, if it's land-based or a marine base, we'll have to have equipment to move people. So do we have from there, do we have people who can drive a car, can drive the boats? Do we have first aid? Do we have all these other criteria? So we've got to have these, how many members are getting trained? That's an indicator. We want to have some performance measure monitoring. We want to have that be able to check in and make sure it's reported on. And we have to have some deadlines. And there has to be some responsibility centers. People need to be accountable for certain things. So if we're expecting things to happen this year, then we have to say it's going to happen this year. And if it's not, that's okay. Explain why. And if it has been, share that success. So it's really important to bring that information back to the shareholders and ultimately the community, because they want to see that, because the community is invested in it. So we want to have strategic performance. We want to have it monitored, and we want to have it shared. That's why we have that circle there. That way we get more community buy-in, and the more buy-in you have, the more understanding and support you'll get should things not move as fast as you'd like. And we talked a little bit about board competency. And we're creating a matrix. We have some spreadsheets we've developed for this. But we talked a little bit about recruitment. And typically includes a holistic set of values the team should possess. So financial management skills, we call this, subject matter experts. So not everyone needs to be an accountant, but they need to understand, financial spreadsheets, and some skills needed to read and interpret them. And if not, maybe they need some training to qualify them better. Some legal knowledge, don't need to be lawyers, but they need to know what a contract looks like, what some expectations are. And again, if through their business experience in the community don't have it, maybe there's some training orientation that can be given to make sure that they have it, because it's critical. This is your board. These are the advisors to your senior manager, the person you've entrusted to manage the business. The board is the brain trust there. The nation needs to know is supporting that person. These people have business skills. Do they have experience in business? So if someone go to school and get an MBA, but if they never run a small business, they don't have that experience, and that's vital. And so do they have the experience but not the formal training? Maybe we can get some training for them. And really important part when you're recruiting a board from outside the community, do they have an understanding of the First Nations that they're working for? Do they know your story? Do they know what your values are? So picking people that respect that is critical. And First Nations, that Community Economic Development Corporation's experience. So that's another opportunity people have from a small business or a social enterprise, for example, could be called upon for that. But really important, be surprised how many people have a board and these members have no idea what the nation's values are. Never been there sometimes. And of course, business experience relates to the nation's industry. So if you've got, if you're going to the mining and logging business, you should have somebody that's done that before. If you're going to tourism, there should be someone with tourism experience on your board. Not all of them need to be that, but somebody has to have it. And then of course, defining what's the matrix should look like is unique to your nation. So you have to then think about that critically. What is your nation's values? What do they stand for? What do you believe you need? What's the ideal person for the job? And this is, this can be pie in the sky. You can push for better. It's not a problem holding that back. Now, the board's recruited ideally through a broad call to the world, and however, First Nations representatives are preferred. Process should strive to ensure those on board whom they appoint have the authority, have the skills needed for the nation's economic development corporation to realize its purpose for the benefit of future and current generations. We don't want just someone holding a seat down. They should have some way to meet the purpose statement of your DevCorp. And around citizen involvement, it can be involved, should be maximized only if they have the skills to do that important work and not at the cost of the community development corporation fulfilling its purpose. So again, we just don't want people filling in the seats to pad it out a little bit with nation members. Those members should be able to be vital contributions to the work that's going on. And we call this Indigenous Comprehensive Corporate Governance Policy Manual model, rather. Next slide here. There we go. So we've got the board governance, internal leadership work. We've got the board's responsibility to the senior manager, so they've got that accounting for that. Strategic orientation, accountability, so planning and reporting to the shareholder and the members. That's an important part of this process. So we have the board's governance, we have that board's relationship to the senior manager, then everyone working together to be accountable and sharing, and then having that relationship with the shareholder and the members, so that there be that reporting, that there be that involvement. So it's annual meetings, quarterly updates, that kind of stuff. There has to be some accountabilities. People know they're connected to this community economic development corporation. That altogether will lead to some positive growth. And because we look at policies and process development, we know that as you strive to be a good governance model in your business, you have processes. When you have repeatable processes, you develop some standards, and then you develop some organization around that and departments. And then you have these reporting of outcomes that come from that. And then because you're always doing that circle, you're always checking back year to year to look to improve. Where you've had some letdowns, update yourself. And that's where we like to have a community economic community involvement in this process. It's really critical. This is the community's DevCorp. So having an advisory committee from the community is important. We're going to talk about more of that in May on the 11th. In addition, it's excellent to build capacity for small business development. So people who want to be on this committee can be, get some training at the same time. And it's important. We know that small business drives 98% of our provincial and economic policies and economies. However, from our nation members, it's only 2 to 15% of the business force comes from small business and community. So we can look to change that. Important when you put these committees together, they have terms of reference, and it's set by the shareholders and supported by the board. It should have a code of conduct, conflict of interest standards, and be clearly stating that the purpose, which is to build awareness and support citizen engaged planning, community needs and interests. It's not a decision-making body, it's just advisory. What resources are available to them. And we have honoraria, meeting spaces, that sort of stuff. And then must have an annual plan to which they create and then report on. So they just can't exist in perpetuity. They have to have some outcome. And additional community economic development agreements for development corporations typically include, like as we said earlier, loan repayments for investments made to support the community's economic development. That should not be at the cost of being sustainable, but there should be a way, there should be an agreement so that there's a percentage or a set fee that's not going to debilitate the dev corporation, but it has to have an honorable payment plan to show that it's making good on its payments, that it's being respectful in membership. That's important. And then, of course, we call reinvestment agreements. So, part of the profit that comes out after the payments on the loan made are to be into training and development to improve the DevCorp. And when you have council members as part of this process, and this will be more applicable to Jason, as they come onto your part of the DevCorp and part of the leadership group, as they sit themselves down and speak to a situation, they have to decide, are they coming as a leader or are they coming as a board member? And be mindful of that. So it's really important what function you're serving, what hat you're going to be wearing that day. So we make these decisions. We blasted through there pretty fast. You're a great audience. If you want to pop your cameras back on, we'll wrap this up. If anyone has any questions, We've got a few minutes to go through them. And this is how to find us. And we're back here on May the 11th. Hopefully we'll see some of you then. But great meeting you all. I really wish you all very well. I'm going to be following up with Ken there because I got a couple leads for him, I think. I'm looking, hopefully we can bump into Bob and we go on our work as we come into community. That'd be great.
Yeah, hopefully we will. Now that COVID's over, we can actually see people in person.
But I must admit, the Zoom is very helpful. It allows us to get around pretty quick, to be able to have these kind of conversations. Happy to see that Jason's found his way back to his home community and he's happy to be there doing what he can for his membership. That's good to see. Really applaud that. I said we really enjoyed ourselves in your territory last summer. Hopefully we'll be up that way again. When it's hot down the south end of town, we'll head up your way where it's cool.
Let me know.
Yeah, well, it was great to jump in the water when it was 20 degrees in the ocean, and that was just amazing. Just off Mudge there, it was just, I couldn't believe it. Just couldn't keep me out of the water. And Ken, did you find this all helpful in your process, Ken, for you?
Absolutely. It's a refresher. It's important to stay in touch with the Indigenous mindset. It's the Western mindset is overpowering. It's all around us. The Indigenous mindset is definitely different. And if you want to deal with the Indigenous, then you need to accommodate, and you need to cooperate, and you need to what's the word? Anyway, the other C word. Collaborate.
Yeah, I get your point. But great business concept you've got going there, Ken. I wish you well. I'll review this opportunity with Laara when she's with us again, and I'll see what clients we have that might benefit from having that opportunity to work with you there.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, appreciate it. All right. Well, thanks very much, everybody. We've got 2 minutes to go. If anyone has any questions, I see we have Vicky and Amy have joined us while we were online there, so we didn't get a chance to say hello before we started. So I don't know when you joined. I was busy talking, wasn't seeing all that. So.
Sorry, hi, it's Vicky. Thanks for noticing I jumped on there. I was
Sure.
about 15 minutes late.
Okay. Well, as Elsie said, it's being recorded, so it's available. And Elsie will send out a PowerPoint slide in PDF form for everybody for review. There's a copy of this on video. And I must articulate now that the survey that comes with that will be critical to evaluate this workshop, so as to determine what it is that you liked about it, or if it met your needs, and more importantly, what more do you want to see going forward? And of course, this is how we get the funding for these this kind of work, is by these evaluations. So as much as the material I share with you today is important, highly important for you to be able to reply to that survey, so that Elsie and her team can then put more of these programs together for future, for others. So appreciate that.
Mark, could I just say one thing? It's Vicky here.
Yes, go ahead.
I've worked with a lot of Aboriginal capital corporations, and recently a group here in Vancouver who works with the Northern Coastal First Nations called Coast Funds. So there's all kinds of structures of development corporations. So all your governance work and overview was really helpful. What I just wanted to focus on, maybe as a go forward piece, is synthesizing some of the sources of business opportunity and structuring the businesses that the development corporations are running. I think about some of the work that I've done to understand the cooperative economy in the past and certain regions where most of the small business spin-offs were incubated by their adult parent company and given contracts. So Bologna in Italy is a really good example of that, so that they build the capacity to deliver to the parent company, and then they start to seek other business.
Yeah.
And so your comments around partnering and looking at the different types of industry that are wanting to and working in First Nations territories, there needs to be a real stepping up of skills transfer and contracting and really setting the stage for success for those local businesses that create all those social goods that you've talked about. And I think it's not always embedded to do that.
And
So
that's,
just looking a little bit more broadly.
and I appreciate your observation there, because that is what we speak to around the purpose statement for the organization can make that part of what they do. And when you have a business opportunity with a partner from to work with your community, you can make that part of what goes forward in your community's economic development plan and your purpose statement on your documentation. That we will, as you say, incubate. Small business development workshops are made available to those who are employees of the nation, of their business, or just the nation in general. That's a critical part of that. But also when opportunities arise, and I'll use that forestry example, where there are trucks that need to be contracted for service, that the members' trucks be properly prepared and trained and oriented to be business owner operators, so they can become haulers for that entity. But ultimately then, to go to Ken's point, they can become a small trucking operation. And then when they're not hauling logs, they're hauling parcels. It's the same kind of a similar business. It's transportation logistics, and it's an important skill that can be transferred and trained. And you can ask of these developments, corporations, and these businesses you're going to partner with to do that kind of skills transfer to the members in your community. Those citizens should have an opportunity to learn and be supported in learning, maintenance skills, truck driving skills, and how to run a logistics operation, because it's something that takes a little bit of time and practice. So that's an important ask as part of your purpose statement. And we've had, I think Amy joined us. So just before we go, Amy, you want to say hello or goodbye?
Yeah, hi there.
Okay.
I did ask a question about the presentation being available to us. We do have some developments starting up here in Chihuahua, and we have seen a few issues along the way. We don't have our laws in place yet, so it seems people don't really understand, I guess, safety measures. I don't know if you have contacted anybody at Chihuahua, but probably would be a good idea to have some consultation.
If you could help me spell that name, I would be glad to do so. Or just put it in the chat if you'd like.
Okay, I'll just put it in chat for you.
And then and Elsie will be sending out the PowerPoint in the slides in a PDF along with the survey, and the recording, as I understand, is going to be available at the website link that Elsie will share. And the idea then is, we found as a way of learning, there was 8 or 9 people unable to attend who registered. They can listen to it again and read it at the same time and come up with a really good understanding of what was presented today. And then, of course, our contact information is available in the slide deck for any specific questions or clarifications. We have no problem supporting any inquiries as to what was being delivered today on behalf of our friends at Can-Do. We're here to serve them in any way we can as part of this work. And of course, we're back here on the 11th to share again. But if in between that time something comes up, just give us a call, send us an email. We're happy to help out. If there's anything that's presented that wasn't clear, we want some clarification, no problem. We're here to serve there as well. I appreciate Amy's comments around rules. And of course, we are governance driven and values driven here at Carden. First and foremost, there has to be those rules, safety and environmental being one of them, as well as making sure it's the right mix for your community. We don't want and we've seen this in some communities, especially in the Wet'suwet'en territory. We're not talking oil and gas or drilling holes in the ground at all. So don't bring us any business entities as a DevCorp that involves doing that. That's just not what we're interested in. On the coast, don't bring us any fish farms. That's not what we're going to do. We have a value statement there, and we have a belief that this is not right. And the DevCorp should be given that responsibility to pursue those activities that the nation believes in and can support. Not just to make money for the sake of making money. That's not what we want. Because every other DevCorp does that, and we don't want to be that way. We want to have a nation-led community economic development plan and create a business entity that supports and delivers on that. So, call it a economic CCP. We want things that mean have value to us, that mean something to us, that don't interrupt our values that we believe in, and we can express ourselves and be comfortable doing that work. I mean, there are some industries that communities don't want to be involved in, and so we don't want to bring those through the door. And we want to have people have a chance to grow and learn and have those abilities to find out what they can do for themselves. And DevCourse can be an incubator. So I like that was what, she just left. She mentioned the use of the word incubator. And I think that's a good example of DevCourse can be that in their communities, because they can bring in the expertise to give people the skills that they need to be successful by staying home. Being successful and being trained and having to leave home is not necessarily what people want. And Jason's a good example of that. He's able to come home now and bring that skill that he's got back to his community. So we applaud that, and our hands up to you on that, Jason. So I really appreciate everyone's time today. We're back here on the 11th. We'll probably see some of you again. If not, send us a line. If you can maybe help, let us know.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye for now, guys.
Bye.